I'm here with Jeffrey Miller at DPE Summit and learning all types of things about modern productivity theory, and very happy to be having this conversation with such a veteran of productivity thinking. Jeffrey, maybe you could tell us a little bit about where you've been, what you've done, and what drew you to this show in particular.
Well, actually, a lot of what my history comes from the connections I made when I moved out to Silicon Valley. One of the friends that I met through the Silicon Valley Patterns discussion group managed to later on be a connection for me in the working with a team doing extreme programming at a place called Avant under Rob Mee. And so we got to know each other. We got to be working on sort of the tedious setup tasks that we needed in order to deploy the application and demo it. And that gave us some common threads in what are things we can do to, at least automate the toil of setting up the database. So later on, that came back to me in my first job after the dot-com crash, which was David Vidra hiring me in to work with Plumtree. I'm wearing an all Plumtree shirt because he had this wild idea that if he could speed up this Java to C# conversion tool, then he could really enable a lot of productivity from the developers who had to wait for an overnight build. And we, over a period of months, using test-driven development and quick iterations, we were able to create a custom tool using actually some of the interiors of the internals of the Java compiler, because it's actually really wonderfully, factored for the different phases. And so we got it to emit some C#.
So I'm really, really curious about that piece. And I have a second kind of question that's going to build on that too. I want to understand the second question. Where do you see common threads in terms of the patterns that you're recognizing today, hearing from some of these folks around productivity and the work that you were doing at Plumtree? But before you get there, I would like to dive in a little bit about some of those internals within Java C, because when you were pre-show, when you were telling me a little bit about this, it was like these things that seemed like they should have been obvious and were actually a lot more accessible once you actually dug in. Tell me a little bit about that experience of actually, digging in, making this discovery, and then the type of results that you saw.
Sure. This is a case where, David and I had actually started out with an alternate Java parser, and then one of the more senior folks at Plumtree said, if you actually look at Java C, it'll give you a parse tree, and you just have to cut, get into the internals and cut the build off at a certain state. Here's your parse tree, and then you can do things with it. So it turned out that the little piece of insight of, there's actually a thing that you could get a reference to and that you could operate on, that ended up being really the key. So this was an AST and a visitor pattern, and it was almost already set up where we could write our own.
And again, just to set the context, circa what time period are we talking about right now?
Right. So this was right after the dot-com crash kind of revived. So this would have been like early, 2000 and aughts. It's in my resume. I just managed to memorize exactly the dates.
But we're talking, we're in the single-digit Java times at this point.
We're talking about Java 1.4.
1.4. Wow. So this pattern exists. The AST pattern that you can actually exploit the visitor pattern, a well-known design pattern for a long time to take advantage of this. Why do you think that this wasn't obvious to other developer organizations? Why do you think that you were uniquely suited to kind of make this sort of discovery?
Well, it was one of those things where it was not offered as a user interface. It was not a supported interface. It was really one of the internals that get an experimentation license, and you look at it and get all the source, and it's like, and that was sort of the key, that the people who had developed the internals had developed really high quality internals. And those high quality internals turned out to be things where there were different phases, and you could take one phase and say, well, let's do another kind of analysis with it. Very much like JavaDoc was its own little insight of, you know what, we've parsed this tree. We can attribute it with comments that are API comments. Very much similar to, well, hey, here's this phase. Maybe we want to do something else with this phase and reanalyze it or generate something else.
So then past that point, once you've got sort of that level of visibility, once you have sort of the exposure, I guess, you have a better idea now incrementally of where this process is spending the majority of its time. So I guess it was this level of insider observability.
It turns out we were using a third-party tool. It was a migration tool, and the migration tool was the one that took the all-night build. So we said, no, let's not have a migration tool because we're not migrating. We're cross-compiling continuously. We have customers who want Java source. We want customers who want C# source because they're writing their own plugins to search their own internal intranet. So we need to continuously improve the source in lockstep for both. So we have to ship in both all the time. And the secret there was we needed that high-speed translation tool.
I see. Okay. Now you make this discovery and you realize that there's this I guess set of bottlenecks that you've determined. But then in doing this now, looking through it, optimizing build and tool chain cycle times and stuff like that, we see a pattern always emerge where it's like there's some low-hanging fruit that makes some big impact. Right. Then you get through that and then you think, well, we could make a little change here, we could save some time here, we could make a change here, we could save some time here. When are you done? When did you consider, what, we could do this, but it's not worth the additional work, or was it always worth the additional work?
Well, in this case, there was one big delivery, and the one big delivery was, okay, there are portal abstraction libraries that already were written. So here are the ones that are the C# ones, here are the ones that are the Java ones. They get maintained in parallel. And the deal was that there was common logic, and the common logic for the portal is the one that needed to be translated all the time, as opposed to the glue. The glue already existed. Once we delivered the much faster translation of the main portal logic source, that was effectively delivered. And so it turned out that, then I was working on that library, which is there's not as much leverage there, and it's a different skill set. It's a crank the code skill set. And I ended up actually at Google Next instead, and which is where I had some success creating a build farm, again, to speed up a service build, which was taking too long.
Interesting. And then so now let's talk rubber meets the road. I mean, we have the observability, we realize that there's room for improvement. We do the work, we figure out what we want to prioritize. What were the results? Where did you end up?
So the results at Plumtree were that we were 100 times faster. So
100 times faster.
100 times faster. We went from overnight to on the developer's desktop. And that was really David Vidra's insight that was the leverage. If we could replace that piece, and then he brought me in as he was the team lead. I was the programmer cranking it forward, and it was great fun because we got to do pretty much test-driven incremental delivery of, here's the sample Java code, here's what it ought to look like as C#. That's a test case now. Let's make it happen. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Okay, let's do the special string handling, which was probably the only little magic we had to do. It was like string and array handling, or things that required a little bit of custom code, but it was not all that complicated. It was just a few small cases once we had that keystone in place that was mostly already there.
And now we're at a productivity conference, and so everybody at this conference, I think, you don't need to preach that we faster feedback cycles, letting developers keep a more efficient state of flow. Like, this is the language that we're speaking. I think we all take for granted. Like, these are good things, but maybe break that down a little bit more for those that maybe haven't taken this for granted. What did you see? What did this unlock in terms of some of this ability to do this more incremental work? What did it unlock for you in terms of new behaviors and capabilities of the team?
Yep. I didn't have as much visibility into that as, say, the manager of the portal team, but it was judged a big success. I got a lucite paperweight as a, you made a big improvement to our development. I won't actually venture to speak for specifics because, again, I was mostly first on the special implementation Tiger team, and then I was on the integration library, check it out team. So I won't venture to speak for specifically what Plumtree saw there, but it was a great success.
And now, so we're talking, a big success that took place almost 20 years ago, dealing with a problem that I think, we're at this conference partially because this problem still very much exists, that we have not figured out a universal way. And even I would say the right set of KPI or criteria to understand what is as fast as it can possibly be. What does that mean? What have we hopped through? What boxes have we checked? So tell me, I'm really interested in your perspective, like where, if anywhere, have we made improvements from now as opposed to 20 years ago? And what patterns are you seeing here today at this show that remind you of problems that you were solving back in the mid-aughts?
I think the tools and the socialization of knowledge on the web has improved. Those two things have improved a great deal. The things where we are actually falling down we are growing the field faster than we can convey skills and knowledge. Every reorg destroys knowledge. Every new person who gets poorly onboarded because they need to be productive, we can't afford to put them in the picture, that destroys the capability for operating with knowledge and perspective. So I think the challenges that we have are in some ways the challenges of success. That because software development is so much bigger a field, the challenges of learning and knowledge sharing and perspectives are the big deal. So in some sense, team topologies, that is where our next edge is. Less tools, although the tools let you do the things that maintain those topologies of knowledge sharing and keeping that wisdom, keeping that information in context.
No, that's fascinating, and I mean, I think that oh gosh, we're losing, lost multiple cameras. So Jeffrey, to kind of close us out here a little bit, tell us where you are right now in your career, having been around for a while, having seen some of these problems. If you could be solving any problem today for any company, what would it be?
Developer onboarding. Here's my running joke. Please, would you clone me off the developer VM, put my credentials in, and I'll get started. And that has been the worst, most terrible joke, because developer onboarding tends to be instead like hazing, not like, here's the keys, go.
That's great. So being able to really ease that on-ramping for the new developer, which
right.
I guess getting them productive as fast as possible.
Right. So maybe tools that support ensemble programming, so you get the mindset of the people who are experienced, rather than everybody having to learn for themselves.
So
that's a tragedy. That's a waste.
Anyone looking for a great veteran platform, I think that's what we're talking about here, is platform engineering to a degree. So Jeffrey, how can people find you? Do you want to be found?
I do want to be found.
How can people find you?
I do want to be found. And let's see. I think you took a picture of you got my LinkedIn profile. So
yep, we've got that running in the ticker down here.
That's running in the ticker. And let's see, I have social media right now. I'm probably mostly jmeowmeow@hachyderm.io.
Say that one more time.
Let's see, jmiller this is a Mastodon server. Hachyderm,
Hachyderm,
right? Like a pachyderm.
Like a pachyderm,
with an H and a .io. And I did a little bit of live blogging earlier, so look at me under Pound DPE Summit for the JetBrains talk.
Pound DPE Summit. Jeffrey, thank you so much for taking the time today. And we'll see you next time on the Build Propulsion Lab.